start by giving everyone their chance to listen to my most important gospel verse. When I announced that I was going to do this, I said everyone should pick a gospel verse. So the gospel verse I picked, I've picked for a long time, is "For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be." That's in Luke chapter 12, verse 34, and Matthew chapter 6, verse 21. That always struck me, it haunted me. It said something to me. Even at my daughter's wedding, I toasted with that gospel verse. But it was so important that Jesus spoke it twice to me to make sure I got it, both in Luke and Matthew. Well, my profession started in Glendora, California. I was a family physician there. I was quite successful. I was chief of staff on the board. Had a great career. We just built a new house. Had a great wife, pretty wife, 2 great kids. Dogs, cars, whatever you needed, I had it all. But I had no faith, and I wasn't with my faith then. The church wasn't part of my life. I was raised Catholic. We grew up across the street from the church, with nuns in my education, the Jesuits, etc. But I felt I was in charge of my life now. No one else was going to tell me what to do. I knew exactly what I had to do in my life. I guess I was in for a surprise, but I needed something at that time, and I didn't know what it was. I wasn't, happy. Whatever happy is, I was happy secularly, but I wasn't happy completely. We had a little condominium down in San Clemente that we used to go to all the time, and one weekend in August, we decided to go down and spend a weekend. We hadn't been there for a while. So we're walking on the beach in San Clemente, then we went up to our favorite restaurant for breakfast. And lo and behold, one of our old friends that were there that we knew since 1970, Gil and Sherry Roybal, which some of you here know. And they were there already. They had moved there from Glendora, and they beat me to my ideal. My idea was to come down here when I retired and spend my last few years in southern Orange County. And I said, hey, wait a minute, it's a turning point in my life was happening. My father had died. I turned 50. I needed something else in life, and they beat me down. So I said, well, I went home that evening, and Helen and I sat on the couch in our new house, and I said, we're selling the house, and we're moving. We're moving. And you can imagine what she said. She said I was crazy, but we did. We moved to Laguna Beach. We had to, because our house sold within a month. We had nowhere to live. So we came down here to South County, and that was at the end of 93, beginning of 94. So I asked Gil and Sherry, I said, I want to go back to church. I want to get that church involved in my life. And I asked them where they went to church. And I said, well, we go here to Dana Point. So we came up here in the spring of summer of 94. It was before the new church opened. And so we started our faith life here. And so that started coming back into my life at that time. So you might ask, what does all this have to do with my profession? And who was in charge of my life? Well, I was still in Glendora. I was still in practice. But I had new friends down here, new friends at the church. I was on a new spiritual journey. And I did this journey along with other friends that had the same ideals that I had. Because one thing I learned is you don't walk down this path all alone. You have to do it with others. A few years later, after we moved here and got involved in the church, we met 2 other dear friends, Rocco and Kay Falabella. And we got to know them, and we went with them on a trip to the Holy Land in the year 2000. Joe and Maria Lupo, Joe's here tonight, was with us on that trip. And Greg also has just come back, and he'll tell you this, if you can go, and if many of you have, you'll know, this is the most awesome trip. I mean, it just brought my faith up to a highest level that it ever was. And after we got back, our friends on that trip, Dick and Ann, who are here tonight, they said, why don't you join our prayer group? So we were involved in a weekly prayer group, and we also got involved in Bible study, which lasted for about 7.5 years, and we finally graduated. And we also went to Medjugorje the following year, and that just kept my faith on a high level. And we stayed with one of the visionaries, Yvonne, and it was just a wonderful trip. And when we got back from the trip, we were with a few of our friends who were pilgrims also there. And when we got back, they said, John, they were patients of mine, and they said, why don't you do something with all this that you're involved in now? Why don't you talk about it in your practice and put up posters about Medjugorje, Blessed Mother? And I said, oh, well, I don't know about that. But I said, why not? Why not? Yeah. So I decided with some trepidation, obviously, that I would do that. And, it was wonderful. I mean, I didn't believe what sort of reaction I would get from the patients. The patients were really bought into it, and it allowed them to open up in their own spirituality, and spirituality was part of the healing. That's something they don't teach in medical school. It was part of the healing process, and it finally, my practice took off even more. At the hospital, I became more outspoken in my faith and my values with the other doctors. Again, this is something new to me. They never, back in the 60s, would teach this in medical school, but I took positions. All of a sudden, I found myself taking positions on abortion and euthanasia, homosexual marriage, and the whole thing. And everyone knew where I stood. And at board meetings, another interesting thing, at board meetings, I found that at Catholic hospitals versus other hospitals, Protestant hospitals or Jewish hospitals, etc., they're afraid to pray. They're afraid to pray before meetings. I noticed that because I'm a surveyor of hospitals, so I go to different hospitals and notice they don't pray, but when I go to a non-denominational hospital, they would. So I decided to start praying before all the board meetings that I chaired. And I found out that other board members would start praying before their meetings too. So that made an impression on me. And another big thing is I found out there were a lot of other physicians that believed as I believe now. And I never knew that before. Physicians that were on the periphery of my life that I really didn't feel were important enough to include as my friends became dear friends now because they shared the same ideals that I did. Then in 2006, I took another step. I became involved in Crescio. I went to my Crescio, and I started grouping regularly. And right around that time, just before that, I had sold my practice, and I was just a medical director now at my hospital. But at Crescio, I decided to do something different with my practice also as a medical director. I started a Christian prayer group, which meets monthly. And, we meet for about a half an hour, 40 minutes. We can have maybe just a handful of people, 5 people, up to 20 people. I mean, it's really been interesting to do this, and it's continued to this day. In fact, the other members of the prayer group remind me, they say, hey, Doc, it's time for our prayer meeting. Okay, so I have to go, yeah, that's right. So we kept it going, and also they now ask me to do prayer services at the hospital for Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter or that. So that's how all this newfound faith that I developed after moving down here in 1993 changed how things were in my professional life. But the most important thing it did is it led me a closer bonding with my wife and my children. And I see their lives more from their perspective than mine. And I see with the God-given gift of maturity that I never thought. Remember I said I thought I was always in charge. I see now with my God-given gift of maturity, I look back and I say I was never in charge. I was never in charge. God was directing me. God blessed me with his direction. He gave me a second chance in life, coming down here to Orange County, getting involved in my faith, getting more attached to my children and to my wife, and gave me a second chance with two great grandchildren that my daughter gave me, and who I'm devoted to. And so that was the most important thing, I thought. So God, family, and friends are now the treasures in my life. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Thank you. So I'll ask if there are any questions. That's next. I covered it all. Yeah.
How did you initiate that first prayer?
it was very interesting. First, I had to find a prayer.
Repeat the question.
Oh, he asked, how did you pull off starting that first meeting with the prayer at one of the board meetings? It was the Quality Performance Improvement Committee. That means anything. But it was interesting because I had to find the right prayer. And Rocco, at one of our trips, we travel out with Joe and Rocco, and we had a group that we traveled. And he found it at one of our travels, I think it was down in Australia, a prayer for physicians. So I decided to use that prayer. And in the beginning of the prayer, I started with the whole prayer. And in the beginning of the prayer, it uses, God forbid, the word Jesus. And the reason why I bring that up is one of the IHM secular nuns came up and said, don't use the word Jesus. You'll offend the Jews and the Muslims that are part of the hospital. This is what the Catholic hospital is thinking in a lot of the Catholic hospitals. They don't want to offend anybody. And I was taken aback by that. So when that happened, I didn't have any problem saying a prayer before every meeting now. So that drove me even more. So I remember that specifically what happened the first time I opened with a prayer.
So did you just say, by the way, we're beginning with a prayer?
They were expecting it every time. Every time. In fact, when I finished coming off the board, the new chief medical officer that they hired asked me for a copy of that prayer that I used. So I don't know if he's using it anywhere, but I could give it to him. Yeah.
John, when you decided to come back to the church, was there some turning point, or was it just a kind of a general hunger in the heart? But I didn't get the detail on that.
Yeah, the question is, what brought you back to the church? Was there a hunger in your heart, or some drives that you had? I think that, I know.
Lightning bolt?
Yeah, right. Yeah, Il Destino. Right. German Rosemary. What happened was, as I said, I had everything I thought in Glendora that I wanted in life. That I wanted. But there was something missing. I try to teach that to my kids. There's something you have to be happy within yourself. And that was lacking. Something was lacking. I didn't know what it was. And that's what drove me, because when I came down here, I decided to go to this church, and also Father Francis, you remember him from the Abbey. He was saying a lot of, he used to come down on his bicycle, his dog, even if sometimes, well, that was Father Knight used to have the dog in him too, but anyway, he said the Mass, and he really, his homilies were fantastic, and I told him, and my wife told him, that your homilies really inspired my husband to come back to the church, and so Father Francis had a lot to do with him. We became friends with his parents later on too, and God forbid, his dad did pass away. But, and also when I came down here, when I decided to move to Glendora, I'm from Glendora down here, I was really, even though I acted like a big shot from the hell, we're doing it and everything, I said, I'm making the right decision. And a lot of people have this happen where a parent, my father came back to me in a dream, and it was almost like someone was correcting me. He said, come on, it's okay, go ahead, move. So with that, coming from my dad and from Father Francis's homily, that's what got me involved. Yeah, great.
What's your plan for the future as far as, evangelizing your profession and those around you?
Well, what am I going to do in the future for evangelizing?
Are you just wrapped up now and are just finished?
Yeah. No, one of the ladies I work with at the hospital all the time, and I practiced the speech with her and with Lise in the medical staff office and some of the other girls, and Lise said to me, this is your next step in life. This is take care of your end part of your life. You're transitioning into this. It's part of Rocio, as you know. That's one of the things we do. We evangelize, and I think my most important thing to do is evangelize my own children and my grandchildren as much as I can, to show them not by force like I wanted to when I was younger, but by my prayer, my example. I hope I can do that and just get more involved. We go. I was telling some of the people here, and Greg knows too. We go to the Opus Dei meetings too that are wonderful. So I'm being exposed to so many wonderful things that our faith, the Catholic faith and tradition have. It's wonderful. So I hope to take part in more of those too.